voice because I'll be careful. Because I'm not in high school right now. I have kids in high school, and I can listen to them, but I'm not in high school, so I'm not experiencing everything that's happening online. I had a cell phone in a bag that went in the car, growing up in high school. So, it's just different, and that is why I think it is so important to have those. Just as my experience is different as an adult, young people's experiences there. I will say some things that have worked for us is we ever had a youth voice on our policy committee met and talk about cell phone policy. And you know what? Our young person had the idea that none of us were thinking about in how to kind of scaffold the cell phone policy that maybe we were coming at it from one side and they were coming at this, and she came up with an idea to kind of to bridge those. And the word bridge is in here, really bridging young people and adults. I will also say for my work, we go to school and do focus groups. And so like getting that data in a focus group is another way that we can bring young people into. And I also too, there's a Morris, Minnesota, they have young people on their city council. So learning those, the civic and governance things, it all connects together.
Thank you all. All four of your inputs are very, very valuable. And I would just like, and we've talked a lot about youth in youth transparency, getting that youth input, which I would like to use to transition into our next question. And some of you may have surfaced on such kind of question just a little bit, but if you can think of any specific examples of issues where student insight might have a more positive outcome, we would love to hear about it.
Well, I gave the example as a cell phone policy. So yes, I would reiterate it was very helpful to have you voice in on that discussion about cell phone policy. They didn't make the policy. That wasn't, the purpose of making. We still, as a school board, as a committee, needed to bring that recommendation forward to the board to vote on. But in making our recommendation, we had youth voice as a part of making our recommendation. I would also say one thing that we're working in the region to bring in is because truancy and attendance is a big thing. We work with Mr. Daffy there and the Promise Fellows in programming for keeping young people in schools. I would love to bring young people's voices into part of and those who aren't coming to school. Not necessarily the ones who are, but the ones who aren't coming to school, why aren't they coming to school? So I think that's another opportunity.
I wasn't on the school board at the time, but from the information I gathered from the other school board members in Painesville, there was an issue that had been brought up about wearing hats in school, and it was through a collective between the student members and through their the principals and superintendent that eventually went to the school board, and there was discussion on that. So we do have, and I'm sure all school boards have this, that they have an open meeting and they have community input. And so that was one of the things that was brought up, and eventually it became where the school district did adopt a policy that students could wear hats in school along with hoodies. So there is that, listening to them. I do know of the 3 years that I've been on the school board, issues have come up from time to time from newer school board members about, why do we allow students to wear hats in school, and I guess myself, I'm under the opinion, does that take away from their learning ability? If that's who they are as far as their character, and that they can express themselves in certain ways, why should that be taken from them? Because if it doesn't take away from their learning ability, then that is something that does need to be adopted.
Thank you so much. Because when we address what you talked about before, I think first I want to say thank you so much to all of you for you shared some really amazing stories of how young people's voices have actually shifted decisions that school boards have maybe made in the past, and just definitely reinforce the idea that youth input is really important on school board decisions. And then I also want to say that, just to be clear, the policy that the MYC is pushing for is, a, like, more, use on school boards across the state. So some sort of mandate around that and less as much around, youth voting power on the school board. So I just want to be clear around that. I think, as Daniel mentioned during our introductory presentation, that's definitely a conversation that we want to have later, because I think there are definitely some of us in the NYC that believe that young people, like, there should be a path for young people to be able to have voting power on those school boards. But I think that that is not the policy that we are pushing for at the moment, just to make that very clear. And then also, I think around, like, young people having adequate knowledge, for, like, budgeting and, serving on school boards, I think is something that would definitely require, like, some additional education. I think there was a 2023 civics education bill that was passed, that would, provide some more of that education and knowledge. But I think it's definitely important, like, for any adults in this room to really recognize that you have been in this space for years, and that there are simply things that young people do not know yet. And that doesn't minimize the power of, like, youth opinions, but it is really important for young people to also acknowledge, like, how adults, like, obviously have been voted in by the communities, and do, like, bring a lot to the table. So that is definitely not, something that I believe that MYC is speaking for here. But yeah, I would love to hear more about, different, I'll pass the mic.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I would like to echo, so coming from a perspective, with School Board Spotlight, we had students kind of sit in at board meetings over the last couple of months, and it's really given us a lot of insight over a lot of the issues that students could have opinions over. After those board meetings are, done, a lot of the students come up to me and just kind of have a conversation about what happened at those board meetings, what their thoughts are. They kind of, fraternize with the board members as well, and kind of let them know what their opinions are. And I think that's really valuable. One thing to note is with the budget, there's always, like, a budget finance and operations report towards the end of the meetings that I think everyone gets confused by, even the board members that are there at the table, just because it is confusing. There's a reason why there are specialists for those things. And regarding taxpayers, like, our school district is having a big referendum this year, and that is something that, people are voting for. People are voting for how much they're going to pay for certain things. And it is something that students have to learn more about, because I didn't even know what a referendum was until, like, 5 or 6 months ago. Now that I do know that, I know that there are more issues that we have to be careful about, and that we have to kind of understand where we have room to grow and learn and give our, input toward, and also what are some things that we, rather than kind of, like you said, making out the school board members to be the bad guy, we collaborate with them. We kind of see them as people that have expertise that we can learn from, rather than people we work against. Or the issues where student insight can improve outcomes. At a work session last month, a Hopkins school board member representative testified onto something that she was able to give a lot of insight towards, and that was the cell phone policy in her school district. So I do think that was a very valuable moment for her and for her community. As for my community in the Wayzata School District, something that they've been pushing for is to have a counselor in every single building in our district. I think that's an incredible sort of feat that we've been able to accomplish. But I know a lot of students also have feedback as to how that could have been implemented better, how to make those resources more accessible for people, and how to make sure that the students who are requesting help actually get it into the level that they need it for. Within that, I think students would have had, if a student was consulted during that process of, kind of implementing counselors in every single building, that vetting process, in some way, shape, or form, I think that would have resulted in maybe a better outcome, in the sense that it's already great that we have those things in place, but there could have been more feedback, more kind of, like I said, consultation with the students as to who those counselors have been, where they're coming from, knowing that that's an option, that's a resource for students. I think a lot of them don't even know that that policy was passed and that we do have that. And so, like I said before, with the increased transparency, I think a student representative not only could have commented on that and developed that policy, but also serve as a liaison within the students to kind of inform that that is now an optional resource available to you all.
Issues, I think, that affect the students directly, you need their buy-in. I think it's very helpful to get student input in. This is back to when I was in high school. Our student council decided that we wanted to start the school day earlier because we wanted kids who had sports and stuff and worked wanted to get out earlier. The teachers weren't really fond of that, but we got enough student buy-in that we were able to convince our school board at that time to do it. So I think anything like the cell phone, the school day, the timing, the block versus I think it is helpful and important to get student buy-in so that they can help build that commitment towards whatever that decision is.
I also like to say it does include like school spirit almost to have students engaged in a certain issue and kind of creating and forming opinions on it at this age. Like I think that's very good for development.
For sure. Thank you for bringing that up. And just adding on to that a little bit, when we wrote our policy brief, one of the key issues that we outlined was actually how when young people have the ability to vote or be more civically engaged at like the age of 16 or when they're younger, then that can actually lead to increased voter turnout when they're older, like over the age of 16. So I think just generally like improving like civic democracy and like just participation in our communities in general, having more engagement is really important for that, which is what the research that we did in our policy brief definitely highlighted. And then just on to our final question for our panelists. I think this has been brought up a little bit, but do you see any other concerns with young people being on school boards? What do you think are the main things that we need to address in order to actually like implement this policy? We can start on this side.
I am not concerned that we have student representatives on these our school district board. In fact, again, I hope that at some time all school boards in Minnesota will have that will have those student representatives. And the big thing that I see with the student representation on the school board, and I guess kind of the question of necessary skills and stuff. Face it, even us panel members that are sitting up here, school board members, we all sat where you're sitting right now. We didn't know what we didn't know. We were all young once. There's things that this world is a bit vast place, and we have to learn from experience and stuff. And I think that is what's helpful with having representatives there. They're starting to be exposed to something that unfortunately, not even a lot of adults really want to get involved in and have an understanding of it. So it's great that we do have young adults that do want to have that understanding, want to be part of something, want to have a greater voice in decision making and understanding how, say, a civic government works, moving up into state and local and things like that. And we do need that. You folks, you young folks here. You are our future, and if we can help out from the school board side, that would be absolutely fabulous. But I see it as a mentoring experience. Take those the representatives from the student body and as school board members, really mentor them. Talk to them about things and ensure that what they hear, what they see. Things that are talked about at that school board that they do get out to the young folks, so that the young students that are there, young adults that are there. I hope that every representative does have those students coming up saying, "Okay, what was talked about last night? What's going on? Where are we at with this?" Along with having that understanding that students can make a change. I was, and so this is in the 70s. I was with a group of in a class, a group of students, and we wanted to have chocolate milk at lunch. So we talked to our teacher about it, and it did end up being, had to do a survey, but there were certain steps that had to be done, the principal and stuff. And I learned so much from that experience, because we did get chocolate milk, but I learned from it when I sat on the school board side of having to understand, what does it really take to get a change like that in? And how involved was it? It wasn't something where, hey, all the students said yes, and okay, next week we're going to start it. It did take a while, and I didn't understand that. but have that understanding as far as those representatives, that change doesn't come easy. And I'm gonna leave you with this one last thought. And it has to do with change management. And I hope all of you young adults here at some time in your futures that you start taking leadership courses to have an understanding of how to be a leader. But change management is something very important to have an understanding of how change happens. And if you do want to have the buy-in of a greater number of people, have that change be forced up from the bottom, or start at the bottom and rise up to the top. And that's what I see with the student representatives, versus having change that comes from the top down, because there's a lot of animosity, a lot of pushback on that. So you folks here, the Minnesota Youth Council, keep doing what you're doing. Keep looking for those people that are going to replace you, the students that replace you, and just have an understanding that there are people out there, especially on the school board side, that do want to hear your voices, and they do want to listen to you, but that you have to collaborate. This country, our republic, was not built on one group versus another. It was a collaboratory effort, and each had to give and take. So, thank you.
I'll be honest, I don't think I knew what school board was until I was a new teacher. Because it wasn't that we didn't talk about it. So, having the, people concerned about, I forget that because it wasn't a thing. So that's back to the unlearning piece. And I have watched young people do this work because they've had the opportunity alongside adults to learn some of these things. Last year, this group brought 14 young people down for Youth Day at the Capitol that you all were a part of. It was awesome. And they talked to legislators for the first time ever, and they did fantastic. So it can be, but Gerald said you don't know what you don't know. I've seen it happen. It's there.
I think that young people are more than capable of the work that is being asked of them if they were to be student representatives on their school boards. I mean, if you think about it, young people, especially those in high school, are balancing so much all the time. Like, they have had to build some of the most incredible time management skills, even compared to some adults, in the sense that, like, you're going to school for 8 hours a day. Some of them balance a job, some of them balance 2 varsity sports. And then on top of that, extracurriculars, research. I mean, I know students who are doing undergraduate level research and can probably speak more on a topic than some adults in a room. And to know that they are capable of all of that, yet still aren't being trusted with the insight and the space that they would need to kind of provide that insight, it's just kind of baffling to me. I mean, we're growing up in these times where, the internet is at our fingertips, and we are more than capable of learning what's going on and happening in the world around us. And we're not, most of us aren't burdened with like the ability of paying the taxes, having children and like all those other things. So right now we have that time, and we have that moment, that momentum to take that initiative. And so if it's not now, then when, right?
I think my concerns over having students serve on the school board have to do with fiduciary and legal responsibilities. It has to do with school boards. Our school board is 7 members. We're elected in alternative elections. Even as 7 members, we don't really represent all the voices of the taxpayers in our community. So having 1 or 2 specially selected students on a school board, I don't think also represents the student voice necessarily. So that those are my concerns. However, I would even if whether you have a student council or not, whether you're on your student council or not, if you have an issue or a concern at your school, you would organize. I would organize. I would ask your school board to meet with you. I have the school board panel and ask them questions and lobby them like you're lobbying your state legislature. Like, definitely do that. Like, you do have a voice, and you can insert that, and I welcome you to do that. I think all school boards are welcome to do that.
I just wanted to respond really quickly to that, because it is a conversation I've had with multiple teachers and people in our district where they are concerned. how would one student represent a high school of 40,000 people, right? And then thinking about the middle school and elementary school levels as well, they also have needs. And one thing that I think the Hopkins School District does an amazing job with is they have councils on the elementary school level, on the middle school level, and the high school level, from when I last heard from them at least. And I think it's incredible that the school board members actually go out of their way to meet with them and kind of consult with them on those issues, because it's better to have some representation rather than none. And I think even having a few people is better than not having anyone at all. And rather than being resistant to change, we should be open to it and rather try something and like refine it than to not try it at all, because we're too scared of what might happen if it were to be implemented, right?
I think I'm gonna vote for.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. One second. But yes, and I think speaking to my experiences at MYC Rep, like, I guess a question that like even though MYC has gotten at times is how you're like 32 young people, like how do you represent young people from all across the state? And I think something like introducing the issue survey, trying to get, our goal is for every young person on the council to reach out to 20 people and at least 20 people in their district a month, and to really build that like just like network and engage with as many students as possible and really inform the decisions that we're making so that we make sure that we are actually representing our communities is really, really important. And I think that that's a really important thing that you both brought up. So yeah, I want to thank all of our panelists.
I did just want to quickly add to, you brought up a really great point too about how, we've talked a lot about how adults don't always know what it's like to be growing up currently. And in that same sense, we also don't know what it's currently like being in elementary school. It's been a long time. So I think you brought up a great point with that, but then also led it with that idea of we don't know until we take that first initiative, until we can take that first step, and that can act as a framework, as a baseline that we can follow for potentially taking that step further towards a high school or a more grown educational sector. So I really like that point you brought up, and I just kind of to emphasize that.
Yeah, with that, I think we're probably a little bit behind on time, so we should probably wrap up our panel. If anyone in the audience has like a couple of questions, I think we can do that, but then we should probably move on to the second group of panelists or anyone online. Yeah, I don't know your name, but oh yes.
Hey everyone, my name's Eli. I attend Beacon High School, and I wanted to like kind of like talk about like advisory councils. Oftentimes, like you guys were saying before, like a lot of adults think like that like these places already exist for students to have a voice. I know like my school district already has like advisory councils, and I serve on one of them. But it's really hard to like access, and I had to call them directly and be like, hey, I'm interested in serving on my school district's like gifted and talented advisory council, right? And I would just say like, what is like the best solution to like get student advisory councils and like school board opportunities like out there, so like in the future other students have like a lot easier to kind of like accessing them and having a voice afterwards.
So just in the interest of time, is there any one panelist that would like to answer that question?
You do have a superintendent, you have a principal, so there's a chain, of hierarchy. Get with, say, to the principal in there and, explain to the principal the issue that you're having, the concern that you're having, and that this isn't just for you, I mean, this is for the future. And ask that, he or she then bring that up to the superintendent, or let your principal know, hey, I'd like to see the superintendent and talk to the superintendent about this issue, and then have that conversation with the superintendent.
I like that as a great point too, and I'd also like to add on to that. I think if there's a trouble in finding that access, it could also be up for a discussion as to how promoted that kind of access is, because when you think of, say, sports or theater or other pretty big extracurricular, it's not the kind of thing that's hard to find. It's not that inaccessible. So I think if we had that initiative to advocate more about what is available for you, the same level that we would any other kind of school extracurricular would be a great step in ensuring that you know what they have for opportunities. Because a lot of opportunities that they might have is just one that they don't know.
Yeah, why don't we do two more questions? One more question? I don't know how to decide.
Okay, great.
Amazing. We'll start with Kyle.
Thank you. I want to ask this because it's one person, right? I want to ask this to the madam on my right. Hi, hello. My question is this. Right now, given the school board representatives I know, they're usually very articulate, well accomplished, and they're usually treated traditionally very positively by the school system. My question is, if we were to have representatives or schools that already do have them, how do we ensure that those who aren't treated as well by the school system are represented? Say people who might come from lower income backgrounds who have to work 2 jobs, or folks who English aren't their first language, or people who are disabled. What we, how do we get their voices in the system as well?
I think that's an excellent point, and I think that is something we need to work on, even with our school board connections, where our principals pick a dozen students and 3 school board members go meet with them. I'm looking around and I'm not seeing any punk hair. I'm not seeing, in my personal opinion, I'm not seeing a white diversity. That's a very good question, and I think it's maybe intentionally making safer spaces. I think it might be smaller groups. I think sometimes students are intimidated by larger groups. So that's something I'm going to keep thinking about. And maybe even if parents out there, if your student wants to have a voice and hasn't been able to have that opportunity, if the parent calls a school board member, it would be and arranges a meeting with the school board member and the student to hear the student's voice. I think that would be very appropriate too. So, does that answer your question? Okay.
Here's what I just want to add to that. I want to say that's starting right here in this room and everywhere else you all touch. And again, this is just like my experience working with the young people in our community. I realize, they look at our decision-making spaces and they're like, we're not represented there. And I asked the question, so what do you want to do about it? Well, I guess one day I can do that. And again, like those weren't conversations that people had with me growing up. Had I known the school board was a thing and earlier, I would have gotten involved in these things earlier. So I love that you all are involved in these things, because if it's not going to happen right now, it is systemically, look at you're doing it.
Thank you so much. And then one more question. I still did see Sarah before, but I don't know. Rigel, you guys. Everybody, I'll introduce myself. My name is Samia. I am a student representative to the Bloomington School District, which is the 4th largest district in our state. And my question is specifically for the school board members. Like a lot of students that I know aren't civically engaged, and they're not really they don't really understand, or they're not interested in what their school board does, even though that makes the decisions for what they have to do in school, and basically how their lives throughout elementary, middle school, and high school are shaped. My question to you guys is specifically, are you going to take any initiatives to bring more students to the table to talk about issues that do affect them, even if it's not on the level where you're introducing them to the school board?
We can definitely put that seed in my mind. I think some of the civics issues, though, it might be more curriculum, and I would like to dig into that. Like, what are we teaching kids? How are we inspiring kids? Do kids even want to? Do kids know who? Well, they don't today who the president is, but do they know who their mayor is, and can we do more with curriculum to kind of inspire and educate?
Yeah, what's within your sphere of influence and control, right? And these are definitely like even sharing this recording and conversation. Having the young people you do have connections with, encouraging them, seeing what they would need to make something happen and come alongside. So I think we all as adults need to just ask ourselves what's within our sphere of influence and control, and coming alongside young people and just start.
I agree. Stacy, you know, what it is within our sphere of influence. And, but I think it, again, kind of two-way street, communication on both sides. School boards can definitely, you know, do, the superintendent stuff, get the word out, you know, because we do have, you know, room for folks to show up, sit down, sign in and listen to what's going on. But we can only say that so long, or continue to say that. And if we don't have that school side that wants to come in and listen to school boards and listen to what's going on, then there isn't much more that we can do for that. We just open up that invitation and ask that they come in.
Okay, thank you all. Never mind.
Yeah, I will say, just to kind of close off, is that you were kind of speaking to a bigger issue on just students being engaged on a more local level. If you compare like national elections to local elections, there's a huge disparity on how much kids know, and that's what you were kind of speaking about too. Do they know their mayor? Do they know their congressman? Do they know their representative? Things like that is a little bit more on like the curriculum managerial level. But I do think in spaces that we belong, like the government, all the United Nations, all these other things that we do, we can make space for that local election education as well. And to kind of show that like real change starts with everyone in this room, maybe not so at the top bottom, but with the bottom up, because that's how things are going to get done. So it really just starts with the students and kind of seeing where they are and meeting them where they're at rather than asking them to come to us.
Thank you so much for that.
Now, thank you all so much. All of your input, all of your values, all of your opinions are something that we deeply appreciate, and we will be taking all of it into how we plan on advocating more about this, as we take in different perspectives. I would now like to transition for Daniel to introduce our second panelist and for this new discussion and engagement to continue. Again, thank you all so much. And I guess we'll transition.
So we have Representative Amanda Hemmingson Yeager, Kyle Chen, Avery Young, and Stan. And I'm Daniel.
Yeah, so just to briefly reflect, I think that was an amazing panel that we just had. I want to thank everyone for coming. I think definitely change started from the bottom up, just from my own experience working as a tutor at my school's like National Honor Society. I knew students that were struggling in math, but they couldn't get access to teacher help because they didn't have after school transportation. But I had. So just recognizing even my own privilege in something as small as that. And so it's really important for us, even as students, to reflect on how do we engage people in the community. So there is that reciprocal relationship between students and the school board. We're both opening up our hands and we want to work together in a collaborative way. So I just want to reiterate, thank you all so much for coming. And so on to two, we're just talking about, I'm looking forward to the 25-26 legislative session. Many legislative staff, experts, and community advocates will share their point of view and perspectives on how all of us can be effective advocates for increasing student representation at the state and local level. So with that, I'll turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves.
So thank you, Daniel. Hi everybody, I'm Sam Strukins. I wasn't sure if I want to be on the panel today. I'm with the League of Women Voters in Minnesota, Civic Engagement Director. And we don't have a clear policy position supporting students on the school boards, but I felt I could still offer some experience and perspective from the last few years advocating for policy at the Capitol.
Hey folks, my name is Kyle Chen. I'm one of the co-executive directors of Vote 16 in Minnesota. We're a group that works at the state capitol to work and lower the voting age to 16 years old school board elections, seeing as this conversation is about students on the school boards, we thought it appropriate to be here. So we're so happy to be invited.
My name is Avery Young. I'm the other co-executive of Vote 16MN. Continuing with that, and kind of a lot of what we're going to end up discussing is that this year, to continue that policy of lowering the voting age, starting with school boards, we're actually hosting 9 school board elections this year. On elections, so we posted in polling places. We have all that information, and also I have like our Instagram, which I can share with everybody. But we're also looking for student volunteers, and like we're trying to engage our student base, like we mentioned, working from the bottom up to try to change that policy. Starting with actually getting the data and the numbers to show like there is a turnout for this. There are people that want to volunteer, run these elections, like there is need, they will show up, they'll take the time to come out of school and go straight from a school day to voting. And like there is a desire and there's a base for this and there's an interest. It's not just some minority of kids that like are super engaged, like hyper involved. Like this is there's a general interest in that. So that's probably a lot of what we're gonna say today, but thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda. I'm Jason Yeager. I am the state representative for South Maplewood, but half of Woodbury. I'm just very excited. Thank you so much for inviting me to come here today and looking forward to conversation and learning from here as well.
Just to start off on our first question, so for all the panelists, what strategies have proven most effective for students and advocates to influence educational policy, either in your experience at the statewide level or even at the local level at each individual school district? Any strategies that you've seen have been the most effective in getting change?
So I'm most familiar with advocating for the civics education requirements for juniors and seniors in high schools in terms of education policy, but I'm also familiar with advocating for voting rights, like restoring the right to vote for those who are formerly incarcerated in Minnesota. And some takeaways from those experiences is that you need to have a legislative champion, somebody preferably who is good with working across the aisle. They have a lot of experience. They know how to get things done. And then the other thing I would say is a lot of community voices, a lot of different people talking about why it's important. So school board members, mayors, whomever has a say or has some sort of sway, not sway, but they're affected by it in some way.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the state legislature, but I want to talk about my own experience with my school board, which is finally relevant right now. So about, I think in March, I decided to kind of take up my school board and try to get a resolution passed by them. And that consisted of talking to my friends, pretty much everybody I knew at the school, and a lot of teachers and faculty, and getting their sign on, having to speak at the school board meeting. And my number one, I think, notion when it comes to lobbying or talking to folks that might change policy is one word, be really annoying. And I know that sounds really crude, and it is crude, but what I find oftentimes when people go to try to influence things is that they go to one meeting, they speak up, they talk about this one thing, and that's it. They pat themselves on the back and they go home and they play their Fortnite. And I think what needs to happen, or what we talked to, was that you consistently be there and you consistently show up. Because what our strategy was, we show up for a school board meeting, we went to their town hall, we went to their fundraising events, we went to their listening sessions, we called them, we emailed them. It was a lot of being annoying. And as bothersome as it might have been, it turned out positively for us. So the main thing is don't shut up and make sure that your voice is always heard.
Me and Kyle are probably gonna say a lot of the same things today. I would agree. Maybe instead of being annoying, it's worded as persistence, is what I was gonna say, but let's be persistent is definitely the big thing. But I mean, a lot of those things are the same. I mean, looking at what we've done on the state level, my school board is kind of a mess right now, so we're not even gonna talk about it. But looking at Vote 16 on a state level, we are trying to lower the voting age. We're trying to change a state law. We're trying to change the Constitution. That's a lot. And a lot of legislators are like, what if I didn't want to do that? And they just don't want to. And that's okay, but it definitely is a thing of find the right champion, like Sam said, find someone that really has a stake in the matter, whether it's like, okay, they have high schoolers that are involved, like they have a high school son or daughter that's involved, like find someone that has an emotional appeal to the reason. They're going to be your best advocate because they truly care. And they're gonna be the ones that have the most like reason to support it. And then also when they're advocating on your behalf, because obviously we're not at the Capitol every day, but that legislator is. Those legislators talk to each other, obviously, like those conversations are having, we're not in the room. But if they have the same passion that we do, they're able to get our message across in a way that's able to almost kind of going into one of the next questions, like how to talk to your audience, but like they're able to get the message across in a way that like Kyle and I and our other students that we take with us when we lobby are not able to get across. Like they don't know that messaging that some of those legislators and senators want to actually hear, and like the verbiage that they need to hear, and the data and the numbers, all of those things, what they need to hear. But having that really emotional appeal from the right champion is kind of a really good way to do that. And that's how we've gotten authors in the House and Senate, and that's kind of what's been our driving force so far.
So the job of a representative, right, is to represent the people. Best way I can know what the people want is by being annoying, being persistent, acting on follow through, being creative. So I've had a couple of different things, like I've talked to Daniel a lot about some things. There's some other students in my district, and maybe a bill or a law change wasn't really the right path. That path wasn't gonna work, but we found a side door and we can do some things instead. So like the example that comes to my mind is health standards and talking about different types of abuse. Well, we could put that as an educational mandate and pass through the law, but we thought, well, if they're redoing the health curriculum anyways, why don't we get her in on a panel and get her in on a task force to help craft the already changing education standards. So be creative, be persistent, be patient. Remember, there's 134 members in the House of Representatives, so sometimes things just take time. I think it's a great idea to look for those legislative champions, ones that have an emotional attachment or have something in their background and their experience. Our current education finance chair is a paraprofessional, so I know to go to her because we talk about making the math, and then she knows what it's like work in the school system as well. So lots of different ways. And that's some of the really, I think, the powerful ways too, is when you get a coalition together and then you're talking and then people are talking and it all just kind of like webs out there.
I can see this real quick because he mentioned health standards in schools. And a good friend of mine, I'm sure a couple of folks in this room know who she is. She got a change to the school health standard just past second with Narcan administration education. And one of the ways that she did that was, as my partner in crime says, being persistent. So I just want to hammer that back in.
Yeah, I think everyone definitely made really great points. Even just looking back last session, change doesn't come once. I think Senator Darren McQuaid's bill, it was the previous legislative session to mandate the student representation on school districts. That bill didn't get heard in committee the first time. And the next time, which was the 2025 legislative session, we worked through various committees. We met with Senator Steve Jasinski, Representative Peggy Bennett on the House side, Representative Cindy Jordan's staff communicating via email. And we didn't get like a mandate, but it was a recommendation. And even that was just a landmark recognition of the legislature endorsing that ideal that yes, we believe in the principle that students get say in their lives in the educational institutions like school boards that shape our lives. And so part of that change is realizing that yeah, it's going to be incremental, but that's also the beauty of it, where that's slowing down, that gives us time to process and work and build a large coalition where we're not just ramming through things by force, but working through various departments, whether it's school districts, teachers, legislators, community members, parents, everyone gets to say in that process. And so we're making change that is actually representative of what the people want. And that's kind of the beauty of democracy. So yeah, I'd definitely echo what everyone says so far. Kind of the next question, maybe we touched on this a little bit, but kind of how can youth advocates build coalitions with legislative staff and community members to actually advance change? So kind of the nitty gritty of coalition building, how do you talk to people? And I'll just say off the top, like stories convince people, not statistics. So I'm a statistics guy, love math, I do debate, but really it's the personal anecdotes and your lived experiences that no one else can deny. you can politicize facts and statistics, but you cannot politicize someone's lived experience on what they've gone through. And so I'd actually say, in my view, that's the most valuable and important part of being an advocate. I'd love to hear what our panel say.
I'm gonna just take the mic first again, but maybe next time I'll let you all go first. But so I would say, just piggybacking off of what Daniel said, I think it's really important to have like what your personal story is or what your organizational story is. So like for the League of Women Voters, that everyone who's eligible should have the right to vote. And that's like what brought us to advocate for restoring the right to vote for those who are formerly incarcerated. Making sure that the people who are living in their community can make a say in the future. And similarly, I think that matters with building the coalition because you have that shared interest with whomever it is that also wants that legislation to pass. So you might come at it from a different angle, but you ultimately have the same goal. So
the big thing I think that prevents actually coalition building among young people specifically is that they don't believe that their voice actually matters. Like the way I see it, at least for the majority of young people across the state, these bodies like school boards or the state legislature or even the national government or even the local city council, they feel like Santa Claus because there's some faraway thing that can influence that, has nothing to do with you, that they do all their own decisions and they keep you out the door. And that isn't true, at least for the most part, it is not true. And I think the main sentiment that our voice does matter has been brought to me mostly by the Center Green Voice, actually. We're privileged to have Mr. Farnsworth, one of the members of the YMCA, Center Green Voice, here present. And their main message is that democracy is not a spectator sport. And the biggest thing they have to do to build coalitions among young people is to convince them that democracy isn't a spectator sport, that they have an obligation and a duty to listen in and to influence. And once you drill that into their heads, finally at that point, you can start making change.
That was really good. I'd like to say that it starts with, and this is almost the opposite of what Danielle said, but obviously storytelling is important. Like I said, you need that emotional appeal. But I think another thing that's important is actually having the data and having the numbers. I'm also more of a numbers person, I think. But I think you really do need both because some people are going to want the story and some people are going to be like, your story is great. Like, that sounds great. But like, why should I actually agree with you? Why should I support you? Why should I join this coalition? And that's usually the people that don't automatically agree, right? The people that are inclined to agree with you, the story is kind of what they want to hear. But sometimes you need to really convince people. And it's really good to have those two things. So honestly, I think the first step, maybe step 0.5, is know your stuff and know what it is you're trying to say. Know what your call to action is when you talk to them. What is it you want them to do when you come away from this conversation? Do you want them to join your coalition? Do you want them to volunteer for you? Do you want them to vote yes or no on a school board election? Like, what do you want them to do? Gives them the path of like how to actually get involved and how to actually begin to support you and join this coalition or whatever group it is you're actually forming. Tell them what they need to do and give them all the information that they need to do that.
And just to kind of piggyback off that, so my background before I got into this is all laboratory science. So having the ability to tell the numbers story and like make it reach humans and people, it's very, very powerful. When it comes to coalition building, so I've also been brought up doing union organizing, and it's kind of the same thing, right? Like, you're getting people together around a shared common value. So when I think of coalitions, some of the really powerful coalitions are, it's not just like one group of people. So like one example I can think of, when I was in like 11th grade, our school board was in a cutter against, and we were like it was a really popular sport. We were really good. And our team became a coalition to basically lobby the school board to not cut our sports. They did not cut the sport, but that's kind of like, it was a single issue, single group of people, right? At the state legislature, when we saw paid family medical leave come up, that was a huge coalition because we had union leaders, faith leaders, business owners. Like, it was a whole swath of the community all coming together for one issue that was really values-based. So when you think about coalition building, don't dismiss people because, well, maybe that group of people or that person, like, we don't really have a lot in common. There might be something in common when you start talking to them and thinking about values. And that's really how you get those broad and really powerful coalitions.
Yeah, I think absolutely. So thank you so much, Representative MYC, for that. I think like, especially values, that really resonated with me. I don't remember who said it, but it was very much like advocacy starts with finding a shared value and maybe a specific policy proposal we might not agree on. And that's okay. That's part of living in like America in a society. But I think having that shared value of we care about family, we care about advocating for our kids, we care about making sure that young people are heard, right? But in what specific forum are they heard? I think that's where we can actually engage and learn a lot from each other. So I'll just say briefly before I talk about question 3, like when I was actually reflecting on this experience, I had the privilege of talking to Representative Peggy Bennett, who represents an area. She's a member of the Republican caucus who represents the area of like southern Minnesota. And I think like her lived experience was very different from mine. But I think what we are able to talk about is we both agree, and she was a former teacher as well. So we both agree that young people have a voice, they need to be valued and listened to in the community. But how do we make sure we do that without imposing excessive mandates or burdens on school districts? And so part of that is looking at how we do this from the bottom up. Can we work collaboratively with each school district? So even when we're developing that curriculum with the MSBA, that like framework and those sample applications, working with the MSBA, like Gerald mentioned, like how do we do that in a collaborative manner and really working from our shared value to create a policy that works for everyone and serves everyone. So yeah, definitely. And then so I guess piggyback off of that. So number 3 would be what advice you have for framing messages so they resonate across party lines. I know we have a divided legislature in the House and of course in the Senate, depending on the outcome of this election. So yeah, how would you frame your messages to appeal to bipartisan group of legislators? People start to vote. Yeah.
Okay, this is tricky, and I only say that because we live in a time where things are so polarized, right? Like you can say something and people automatically assign like a label that you're a Democrat or a Republican. But what I do find when I try to think of things, so I have all the bills, passed bills into law that have been across the aisle bipartisan. And again, I bring it back to values, and I think about the incentive or what drives the person I'm talking to. So I had a bill about regulating cryptocurrency kiosks to protect our senior citizens and to protect people from consumer fraud. And the Republican I talked to was a lawyer, kind of more on the businessy side, and I kind of just talked to him about it, and he hated cryptocurrency. So we talked about this cryptocurrency. We talked about it in a way that he was interested in the bill. I was interested in the bill, maybe for different reasons, but like we still came together and we're like, this is a good bill, let's make it better together. So I think when you're framing stuff, like you want to keep it general, you want to keep it centered on those common shared values, and you're only going to get to know that by talking to people and thinking about like what's important to them and relating to them and really listening to understand. So it takes a little bit of extra work, but you always end up with a better product for it.
So that was actually every single word of what I was gonna say, but definitely leaning into that message of like know your target audience in a lot of business classes right now. So that's the word we throw around a lot, but know your target audience, know, well, kind of like I said earlier, like what do they want to hear? How do they need to hear the message? How do they need to receive it? What do they care about? What do they value? And how can you marry your own values or the organization's values and interests and the overall goal with what they want, and kind of show how everyone can benefit from this change. Adding students on school boards benefits everyone. Giving students the right to vote benefits. There's no harm in extending the right to vote to more people. But how are you able to frame that as though like, oh, well, students, aren't paying as many like taxes, like they might be paying income tax, like what about property tax and like all these other things that they are most likely not paying. Like, how are they supposed to vote on these things they don't know about? That is something to consider. That is definitely a harder question to answer. I know that was hard for us last session, but trying to think about how to answer that question for the right like demographic that you're talking about, whether that's like an adult supporter, someone who's maybe against your cause, trying to get a student volunteer or a student voter, looking at, Republican Party versus Democrat, like know who you're talking to, what it is they want and kind of almost get in their mind of what it is they want to hear, their values, like you were saying, and kind of what their interests are and how you can show that you're the same and definitely fight that polarization of we're not opposite. Like, yes, I may identify as a different party than you, but like we have the same values. We're still in the same community, we're still in the same space, we're still connected to the same school board. Like we have all of these similarities. Let's build off of those.
Hi, so I would agree with the representative here that I believe that as of right now, with the current party system, where one good idea comes up and either caucus tries to snatch it up and block the door for other caucus. That's ultimately harmed our current state, in my opinion. But I think the biggest thing in terms of making sure that that can be mitigated, at least in some sense, is to try to show them that their constituency supports it too. So take, for example, our legislation, lower the voting age. It's had very broad support from both parties in terms of young specifically. First of all, we've had both the National Federation of Republicans endorse it in a New York Times article, as well as had the Democrats put it in their national policy goals. Additionally, the Cincinnati Boys recently had a booth at State Fair, and in there we found that out of everybody who went to State Fair, and this is the CYB booth in the education building, they found that 71.5% of people who filled out the survey support the issue. Additionally, our Votes Team Minnesota organization has both Republicans and Democrats there. Because when you analyze each issue under the lens, it doesn't just belong to one party. That's to use Frank words, kind of stupid. Because every issue has nuance, and every issue, if it makes sense, should be supported by people broadly. And that's what we find for issues that do make sense. And this, as students on school boards, is one of that issues. So you show them that their constituents support this, and that by proxy, they should support it.
I have nothing to add.
I think Kyle just made a really great point about talking about analyzing values and looking at it from both lenses. I think even in our report that Sean and Brayden mentioned before, we have a specific section that's focused on the conservative case for youth voting. And we have multiple conservative members of the British Parliament and the Scottish Parliament that we cited in our report who supported it. Because to put it in perspective, analyze the issue from both lenses, part of youth voting and youth serving on school boards even is teaching that civic responsibility as an American citizen, as a person living in our country, because you're 17 or versus 18. When you're 18, you get to run in a school board election. You get to vote for people on the school board. You get to vote for the president of the United States. And so really setting that groundwork and making young people 16, 17, or even earlier more responsible and aware of important nuanced issues like what is our budget? How do taxes work? Part of that is, say, taking a government class for civics, but also part of that is taking on leadership and becoming more responsible as young adults and realize that, yeah, this country's future is in our hands. We have a duty and a job to step up and make sure that we're being responsible as young adults and as Americans in our country. And so I think like having that opportunity is really important. Like a lens can be both reflecting Republican or Democratic values. And so having that intersection of values is really where we're going to be able to advance effectively. So quickly, in the interest of time, the last question, I'm looking ahead to the 2026 legislative session. We know it's going to be a policy here. So what specific legislative committees and maybe the legislators themselves should advocates contact and reach out to and work the coalition building with to advance this proposal, or even at the local level, if you have interested persons or groups.
Thank you. There's probably a lot of different ways I could answer this, and I can't think of the right term, but I think you want to first have meetings with legislators to get like the temperature. But then also by getting that temperature, map out how long of this campaign, like how long is it going to take to actually get this policy across the finish line? And then if so, like who are you meeting with to move that forward? Like if you think it's going to be next year, then you're meeting with the caucus leaders. But if you're thinking it's like 10 years, then you're going to meet with anybody or the people who were not in committee leadership, just to like work and develop a legislative champion and that. So yeah, just focus on bipartisanship and making sure you're not framing this as though we're going to target one party. Make sure you target everybody. And I think that's it.
I'd like to talk more about Sam's point because he is right Because again, for example, our seeking of lowering the voting age, we're well aware that will take a long time. That's fine by us, because good things take a long time. And with that, we, talk with everybody we can. Of course, targeting is important, as well as Sam said, where we made a strategy of trying to talk to every member of, for example, the Senate Elections Committee, talking to them, especially people on both sides. In the House, where you have split leadership in committees, talk to both party chairs there, President Guam, which is a bit more difficult ask there, but it's a lot of make sure you know who you're trying to talk to and then go and actually doing it.
I'm gonna jump off of that, especially last legislative session, we spent a lot of time actually trying to lobby to the representatives and like the legislators themselves. And I would honestly say that that was potentially step 2 for us. Step 1, honestly, should have been talking to the students. We need to show, like we were kind of just talking about in the last question, you need to show the constituency support. So we're actually kind of doing that step now with running the school board elections, but also that CYB booth election to show that there is support from different age demographics and groups and all these different, I guess like, demographics of people and like different ages and all these different things. And like they have different reasons to support, like obviously 16 and 17-year-olds are gonna be more inclined to support themselves voting because they want to vote. But like, why should current school board members, like why would they want 16, 17-year-olds to vote? Like that may change election results to have these voters. Like some people are going to not necessarily want those sorts of things. So just thinking about that. But a lot of our partners, we worked with Senator Steve Swazinski in the House this year. He was, or in the Senate. He was our author for that. We also had Representative Spencer Mira in the House. We also kind of have been partnering with the YMCA, the League of Women Voters, and partners with the MYC a little bit. We're kind of dabbling in that right now, actually. And tapping all these different youth groups, but also adult groups, even with like the Facebook moms for the schools and like all those things that we're trying to tap all these different types of people to show that they're like in general, there is support for this and that it should be something that our legislators and our leaders are also continuing and picking up the rallying cry for, because there's a crowd behind them. So let's support the crowd.
I'm gonna circle this back to the coalition building. So number 1, every representative, every senator will say, my constituents are the most important. You get front of the line service, take them up on that. Talk to their legislative assistant. If you can't get a face-to-face meeting, ask for a Zoom meeting, ask for a Teams meeting. It's sometimes like emails and letters and postcards are effective, but sometimes they can get kind of pushed aside and have the staff go through it. Try to get some face-to-face time. If you guys have friends in other districts, other schools, I should ask, are you guys mostly Metro kids here? Metro schools? No? Okay, some upstate. Okay, cool. So I remember when I was on speech team, we would always have like these speech meets, and there were like a ton of schools, and it's all over the place, but you make friends, right? In your sports and in your activities. Start calling them and say, hey, we've got this thing coming up. We've got this, voting at 16 for school boards. Would you call your representative, your senator, and tell them how important it is, right? If you can do that coalition building. And then if you can really be coordinated. So all of the bills are still alive from last session. So that means that everything up that was introduced last session can still be brought up in committee discussion. So hammer in on your personal reps and say, I want the committee to hear this bill and I want your support. Would you co-author it? So that kind of gets your representative, your senator support. That's going to pressure then the Education Finance, the Education Policy Committee, because they're going to get pressure from people to say, hey, my constituency really cares about this. Can you give it a hearing? So then you're going to start coordinating with those committee members to then pressure the chair. And the more pressure that they get, they're going to be like, well, we really need to have this hearing. Okay, fine. I've heard enough about this. We'll give it a hearing. So that's kind of, and then you kind of keep on that. And the more people that they hear, it's the squeaky wheel effect. So, but if you can be really coordinated where you're getting your people to talk to their representative at the same time that you want the bill to be heard in the committee, then it all kind of can come together and you get a committee hearing and then talk to raise inside baseball.
So I guess just my personal experience, don't let up during the like omnibus, like conference committee session. Sometimes things get dropped, they get left off. They're, they're in the House bill or they're in the Senate one. And so I think really for us following up just last year, just getting that encouragement provision passed, we saw it getting whittled down in the funnel from a long piece of legislation getting a committee hearing to a paragraph on the Senate side, then to about one sentence in the final special session omnibus bill. And so, yeah, it was tough for us, but I think it also made us appreciate that, like, yeah, legislation takes time, and you got to keep following through with consistently with legislators from both chambers, consistently till the last day, till I was actually live at like 11 p.m. watching like the recording of them passing the bill, but like till that point. So always keep engaged every single day, 24/7 until you see it pass. So that like being dedicated, persistent, squeaky wheel gets the grease, whatever you want to call it, annoying, like just keep at it. I think that's really cool. Now we're going to transition quickly to the question segment. Yeah. So if anyone has questions of our panelists, please feel free to raise your hand. Oh, I get my steps in.
So you all from the 16 USA talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear just generally when you're looking at issues that you're really passionate about. Obviously, we do a lot of that on the Minnesota Youth Council. What are some of the key ways that you get community input? And some of the first ways that you'll go to do that?
That was a really good question. So for us, last year was our first year introducing the bills. Like we introduced our bill last year, and we got up to the point where we could have had a committee and we decided to pause. But so this year we're hopefully trying to pick up from there. But to get more support, we got a couple just from like our friends and like the State Youth in Government, NJC, like any of those other kind of civics related clubs that we were in. Like that's where we initially started. So our group was like 12, I want to say. Like it was a pretty tight group last year of just kind of like, like you were saying, like speech, like I personally know you from this thing, please come and support us. This year we're working a little bit more to obviously expand like our constituency support. So like I mentioned, we had those couple of surveys. We did one at the Anne Bancroft Foundation as well. We did a survey that had 11-year-olds all the way up to, I think it was 18 plus. Actually, we had a couple of adults fill out our survey. And actually like put them in a ballot box. I did get that experience and they feel like there were some like silly questions, but just to show like there is support for this and like there was like genuine excitement to be able to go and have the experience and like vote. And that was really unique. And I was not expecting that. But so just giving almost like interactive ways to get involved and making sure like once you get a base, now I think we have a group of 35 in our like group chat that we have where we like disperse different ways to get involved, like make sure that they're accessible to everyone and like people feel like they can get involved in a way that they like to the level that they want to. So whether that's like, I want to call a representative or a senator, like I want to just do a call or I want to just write an email or a letter. Give them the materials, like here's our tutorial, how to write an op-ed, here's how to like do all those things, but also like, here's this, and this event that we're hosting, like we're doing a rally. In this session, like we're doing a rally day. We also have a couple of lobby days already scheduled where like those are coming up in the session. Feel free to attend, mark your calendars. This is what we're doing. And like have a range of options from like online Zoom call to like, hey, email me this idea of how you want to get this out. Or you can make, a PA announcement to your school, or like you can post up this flyer, like give people like the level of involvement that they want to be able to have. And I think that's been our best way is like word of mouth, like, oh yeah, you can get involved and like you can get community service hours if you like volunteer for running the election. We need volunteers to actually staff the polling place. We're tapping like NHS and different or National Honor Society and student councils because they need community service hours. Hey, you can get community service hours if you volunteer for this thing and like get the word out. That way they go through all these different channels of your peers, like you have connections to, and people will just talk about it on their own. And that's also been really helpful is like, once you're able to get one or two different groups of people passionate about it and talking about it, it spreads on its own.
I will only talk if there are no more questions. Are there any questions? Any questions?
Okay, so if y'all ever want to feel free to leave, thank you so much for being here. We're just going to stay a little bit for questions.
Can I just make a quick announcement? Next purpose, I'm the executive director for the Association, learning their ex-school board members today. So I think one of the things that you should know, we're in our fourth year of offering a student school board conference, and it's gonna be this week, in fact, on the 29th in Farmington. So hopefully I'll get to see your faces there too. But, so I think it demonstrates our commitment to help our boards, to help our students find a path that's gonna work for everybody. Gainesville may have 2 school board members, Alexandria may only have 1, but there's a model out there that's gonna work for them. That's what we're trying to support you on. And secondly, I just want to compliment all of you for coming here on a Sunday. I mean, I get chilled when I just listen to you guys talk about policy stuff, being active, being strong advocates. So keep up the good work. And Daniel's been very generous in reaching out to us to work with us on some of this stuff. So I just want to compliment him for that too, about coalition building networks. It's really, really helpful. So wish you the best. That's all I got for you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Also, just a brief note, we can chat later, but hopefully you got my email. I actually lost access to it after I sent you the material. So if you ever want to follow up, thank you so much for being here. First of all, and having that meeting with you and Katie. It was a great privilege to have that conversation. So yeah, we appreciate your support and collaboration as we move forward in our legislative session. So if there are any more questions we can take, but if y'all want to leave, feel free.
I guess my question is, I know we talked about like evaluating or keeping track of when policies are initially bringing up to legislatures, but how can student advocates actually like use a systemic process to evaluate or analyze how their ideas are being processed through like legislatures as they're bringing up?
Do any of the panelists want to take that question? Open to everyone.
Do you like spreadsheets?
So when I was as a policy analyst, part of my job is tracking bills through the process. And I used an organizational style that worked for me. So if you play around with the Minnesota legislature website, it has so many things. You can look at every single bill that's introduced every single day. You can click through it, it'll take you there, you can read the language. You can sign up for emails to give you notifications about hearings coming up. So say you really are interested in education finance, it will give you an email every time there's updates to education finance hearing, and it'll give you all the bills they're talking about, all of the materials that you need. You can go in there and start a profile and just say, track my bills. You want bill 1, 2, 3, 4. And it will give you email updates every time there's something that happens with bill 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's lots of really nerdy ways. I'm a really big nerd. So if you want to like play around with it, I can show you on your phone or whatever. But I kept track of everything in a spreadsheet. So it was like the bill number, the author, quick description, when it was heard in this committee, when it was heard in that committee. And then it gets really tricky to track it during conference committee time because things move sporadic. So but yeah, just be really organized and really like,
Yeah, definitely. I would say like also looking at the calendars for when it's going to get heard in each committee. I know on the Senate side, since we're testifying, if you click on the calendars, you can see each day which committees are having hearings, the materials, the bills are getting heard. And so we would still look for reticent to go through it, but it can definitely do favors. Get in touch with staff if you ever want to testify on a bill, like say a couple weeks or just even a couple days before, and you can always arrange for in-person or virtual testimony if you're interested as well. If there are any other questions, putting that up to the audience. Last call. Otherwise, yeah, I think we'll probably wrap up this panel. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and sharing your wisdom and expertise as we move forward with this upcoming session. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. And just to close off, for coming here on a Sunday, giving up your time over 2 hours to be here at this event. So yeah, we couldn't be more grateful for y'all giving up your time and experience to come here. So thank you all so much.